Hey everyone, and welcome back to Railbird Radio. This is episode 1 of the new year, 2023. A lot has happened since we obviously had our last show, but I am Chris with Fractious Stables, joined by my co-host Dan with MB Stables, and we have a special guest on the air with us today, Ed from Wood Duck Stables. How you guys doing today?
Doing great, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, doing great, Chris. Excited to be back in action this year, and we had a lot of exciting things happening, so a lot to talk about. Probably not everything we can get to today, but we'll cover a few things.
True. It's good to be back. Hopefully we can remain committed to the show and we have feedback from the listeners as well. And Ed, I really appreciate you joining us. That's what we need, player involvement on the show as well. So I'm happy to have you aboard here today with us.
Exciting to be invited, and I don't know what expertise I can really try to give this group, but it's excited to try anyway.
Hey, listen, we got the master here with us. We can learn from him, if anything, right?
Yeah, always, every day.
So, guys, let's just jump right into it. I mean, biggest news, biggest change, new year. We have a new race engine. What do you guys think about that?
Dan, I'll defer to you first. Okay, I'll go first. Okay. So I will first say that I'm very excited that they were able to go ahead and make such a big change and do it quickly and announce it smoothly, get it out smoothly. There haven't been any glitches. Like, I think that in the past, sometimes Horse Racing Park has kind of been a bit more slow to to get stuff going with these sort of big time changes. And I know players have been complaining for quite a while about some of the features of the old engine. And I think, that there were some positives that Horse Racing Park made with the new engine, with the past engine, but man, the brake issue was it was so dramatic. If you got out of the gate slowly, you were just compromised from the start, and it was really hard to overcome that in any field with any, moderate size, even more than like 6 horses. You were really in trouble. So it felt unrealistic, and I think we were overdue a change. And coming into this year, it was good timing that they said, okay, it's new year, we're going to roll out this new engine and smooth out the brake, and let's see how it goes. And I think they did a little bit more than smooth out the brake. There's several things that are different, and it's just the early days, but we're gathering a lot of information on it. And I think that they did a good job of eliminating this gate brake thing. It seems that the brakes out of the gate are really pretty reasonable. Horses who are slow do brake out of the gate slower. Even horses in the old engine who they seem fast, but they get out of the gate slow. It sort of is the same now. It's just not as exaggerated. But of course, with every new engine, there's new features of what seems to be working, what seems to not be working, and I have some concerns without trying to dive into it too deeply, but just surrounding tactics and pace, and there's some like overall features of the engine that I feel like they remind me of some issues that we've had in past race engines, and maybe it's just sort of my Horse Racing Park PTSD recalling engines where 90% of people were using the same instruction and being worried that's going to happen again. But so far the best thing I can say is a lot of the best horses I have when I'm entering them are doing pretty well. Not all of them. There's some stuff to figure out, but it's not all negative. Just some early concerns, and I think as every week goes on, more big races, more important races, you get to see horses have a second try in the engine. I think we're going to learn a lot as we go. Ed, what are your thoughts? I know you've been pretty positive about the race engine, so you probably probably don't share all the same thoughts as me. I'd be interested to see what you think so far.
Well, I'm kind of moving a little closer to where you are, although I think there are solutions except the speed issue. Just unless I'm missing something, if you go out too fast on AA, it's kind of hard, on above average. It's kind of hard to get excited about going fast or on lead, and that may be something I'm missing in that maybe you have to get that 2-length lead and not a 1-length lead or a 3/4 length lead for speed to work. I haven't been bold enough to try that, so I don't know the answers. I will say the inside is so much different than the outside. It's almost like on the outside, the horse, if you just tell it to run its race, whatever you kind of think, its instructions should be, if you just kind of match whatever speed it has, it seems pretty accurate. We don't have a huge negative. If you draw way outside, you seem to be able to survive that. On the inside, I'm just guessing, but I think we have to be more aggressive on the inside. It's almost like there's a dead rail, and if you have a horse with speed, you need to push it along a little bit. But I mean, the biggest concern I have is we're all headed into TC races here, and we have no idea what to do. Obviously, an educated guess, but on the old engine, we would know the horse that didn't belong. Maybe its works were great, but the horse couldn't get out of the gate, and you just kind of leave it behind and race in allowance races or something where it had a shot or smaller fields. But now, you draw the 3-post. What are you going to do? I just don't have I don't have an idea. I guess we're guessing. We're all guessing at the same time, and my gut feeling is we've got to push them along a little bit. Maybe that's push. Maybe that's AA, which might act very similar to stock from the outside or average from the outside. But it's all a guess. I don't know. That's my one criticism. I wish it came out the day after the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, I agree. It's quite a change. Dan, Triple Crown prep races, 2 years ago, everything was off the rail, stock off the rail. And I mean, I guess that's a good change in a way that automatically you get the rail draw, you can't go stock, and you're pretty much an 80% winner. So that changes things up there. And I think it's a good thing that, these horses don't get left in the gate like they were. I know when they transitioned to the last race engine, I had made a couple big purchases on closing type horses. And then when they changed, those horses just stood in the gate while everybody left. So I lost a lot of money on that. So that's a factor too, even with this change, this new race engine, is what type of horses you have, what type of horses you acquired. And then all of a sudden the race engine changes and things are a little different. There's good and bad, as you guys mentioned. Obviously the pace makes the race is probably the biggest issue, right, Dan?
Yeah, in my eyes it is. And this is something that I've thought for a really long time in this game, that I've never understood why there's such a difference between the workout engine and the race engine when it comes to how a final time gets translated. Because you can have, just as a simple example, you have two horses who have, one's a front running style, one's a closing style. When you work them at 5 furlongs, 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs a mile, they could have the same time at every distance, except one of them is starting 6, 7, 8 lengths behind the other. But it seems like we haven't had a race engine where that actually happens in a race in a long, long time. There's always been an ideal place to be. And in my eyes, I always felt like it was because it really wasn't effective for stables to just go out to the lead, just to go as fast as their horse can go. Sort of the classic style that I think a lot of American real racing has, where some horses are just best when they're out front. It doesn't matter if there's a horse tracking behind them, they just need to be out front. In this game, being out front with company is really challenging. And so, like, as Ed mentioned, you kind of want to have a 2-length lead. Well, it seems with this new race engine, it's just that's not an option for us as a trainer, as a instructor of the horse. I've tried on several horses to use fast or lead or pretty aggressive instructions, and generally what happens is they get to the lead and then they just kind of cling to whatever horse is there, and sometimes another horse from the outside gets that push, which Horse Racing Park mentioned that to get horses into position, they're going to have the outside horses have more ability to push or pull back into position. Well, that push is something that if you're on the inside, you don't have access to at all. So you pretty much have to get buried, or you have to use a lot of energy to keep up with these other horses. Whereas at least on the previous engine, yeah, it was unrealistic that half the field was breaking, losing 5 lengths out of the gate. But you could set a horse on lead, and if you were the only one on lead, you were going to clear the field. And the counter argument to that I've heard from a lot of smart players is, well, you can't tell any horse in the game to go to the lead. And in this past engine, you kind of could. Not every horse, but like 95% of horses, you could have put them on fast or lead and they were going to get to the front. Whereas in real life, I can't imagine Zenyatta or, Honor Code, name any of your favorite closers. I can't name them. I can't imagine them, going to the lead even if you wanted them to. So there's probably a balance somewhere in between. I don't know where it is. I just always imagined that a fair engine would allow horses to go out front as fast as they want, and then let the closers benefit off of that if they go too fast. It just makes more sense to me than having an engine where it seems that for every horse the best trip is to run sort of an average-ish pace the whole way and then have a clear lane at the end.
Yeah, I do think that, again, if you get the lead on average, it's about an 80% win rate right now. I don't know how you decide that before the race, but I've been running so many first-time starters. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I've noticed that as well. If you get the lead unintentionally, sort of, like if you're not trying to go too fast but you get the lead, it's a very good place to be. But if you try to get the lead, it seems that you're using a ton of energy to do it, and then you just set it up for somebody who is sitting in the same position you would have been if you just used a stock or average. And so my worry is, over time, isn't everybody just going to try to use average, stock, mid-pack, all those sort of conservative instructions, don't go too fast, don't go too slow, and let things be? And then at that point, it just becomes a game of, like, who entered the fastest horse. And yes, there is some merit in that game, but, the reason a lot of players love this game is because you have some flexibility. I mean, really, we can't train the horses to be too much better. You can do things to screw them up, but you can't really make them that much better. Instructions and tactics is sort of, that's our go-to of how to make horses better. And it's a big skill component to the game, and this is a game of skill, right? It's not a game of, hope that you entered the fastest horse. I mean, yes, it's nice to have the best horse, but I think that tactics should play a role, if that makes sense.
Chris, anything on that?
Yeah, I agree. We're kind of back in the same boat. Do we have to wait till after Breeders' Cup this year for any more changes? Or they can change it on the fly? That's the toughest part, is the communication with tech support. Wondering, are they still working on the engine? Are they taking any feedback that we provide and implementing it into any new changes they could possibly make? I mean, you guys have probably been here longer than I have, especially you, Dan. I know I've heard you guys have gone through several engine changes since I've been here for the past 5 years or so. I think maybe 3, and they all happen at the end of the year. So is it more or less, do we have to adapt to what it is, or are they going to try to make it a little more realistic and use feedback from the players?
I guess the one thing I'm curious about. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
Yeah, just quickly. The one thing, in the past, there have been times where they just put it out and stuck with it until they decide to change it. But this past one, they did make, I think 2 revisions, maybe 3 revisions to the engine, and they all happened within the first month or 2 of it coming out, and then they left it how it is for the remaining 2-ish years it was present.
I guess my big question is, will the length meter, the L's, we put 2-3 L's on a horse, will that change it? What could make it really a fine line between having your horse run, quote unquote, its race or not? For example, if you were on 3 or 4 L, but you ran it on above average, would that slow it down a little bit, or? all kinds of variations to that. If you're on average and you're on 1 or 2S, will it go a little faster? And that's a lot to try to digest between here and April to try to qualify a horse for the tournament.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it too off air that if you work your horse a shorter distance consecutively, like that should be able to build some speed into the horse, right? Like in real life, if someone wants their horse to get out of the gate and they want more speed out of their horse, well, they're probably going to break them from the gate or have a quick work at 3 furlongs, 4 furlongs. That's the one thing I wish they implemented. To say workouts don't correlate to the racing side, that's just tough, because then how do you know how to manage a horse, how to train them, and how to get the best out of them?
I always wonder, if a horse goes out in a 6 furlong work, let's say it goes out in 23 and 1, and then back it off somehow, and it goes out in 24, and it runs faster. Is that telling us something? And sometimes it is. And not that second instruction is the magic instruction, but maybe that slow horse is a little rank and you need to do something to slow it down, or the reverse. It goes out in 25 and 4 or some crazy thing, and you push it in better. So in workouts, Dan, do you have any thoughts on just relating the difference between the HL and faster going a little down?
Yeah, I actually kind of opened my eyes to this concept last race engine, and I'll have to give credit where it's due. Everybody knows, Smokey Stover is one of the best players in the game, and there's only so much ass kicking I can take before I'm going to start claiming horses and figuring out what the other person's doing. So, I remember claiming a few of his horses, and I'm seeing him using restrain and heavy restrain and push and heavy push a lot, and I'm thinking, I've never used ever since these came into the game, I've always thought they were a joke. Like, why would you ever use them? And I was very stuck in my ways, thinking that every race engine just sort of has a bias, and you got to play the bias with your horse. And yeah, if you have a slow horse, you maybe use stock instead of mid-pack. That was the extent of how I saw it. But then I see him using it, and I start testing it out with my own horses, and I did feel like on the last race engine, if you had a horse who worked faster on restrain and they had some speed, when you did that in a race, it seemed to help them. I mean, it wasn't 100%, it wasn't a 1-to-1 thing, but there was something to it where the horses that work better on restrain or push or heavy push, or the horses who work worse on it, there was something real there, that either they needed to be restrained a bit in a race and maybe that tells me maybe I don't use restrain, but I use a slow pace instruction, or I just need to make sure that I'm at least stalking, I'm not on the lead. Whereas a horse who, if you restrain them and they get slower, I just have to let them go. I saw some success with it. It was sort of a strategy I was unfortunately I was kind of blossoming into it as a stable. I feel like I was sort of getting my groove, and then they changed the race engine, and now I don't know anymore. I had a really silly example today, a horse named Omega Nebulae, who, for whatever reason, he works like almost a second faster on restrain. I have no idea why. He's very inconsistent. He's a 3-year-old, and when I ran him on restrain in the old engine, he did not run well. And then when I ran him today on restrain, he ran okay, not great. Like, maybe it translates better on this engine. I don't know. It's too early to tell, but I do think that would be a positive if that was a real factor in this game and this race engine. Yeah, I have some current concerns about if your horse is really best going fast, is that really the best thing in this engine, where it seems like if you go fast and you're not getting that outside push, it seems really nice. It's nice to get the push and not have to work for it. Maybe it's not a real thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and Ed, what do you think about how support came out in the past and basically said, well, it depends on what everybody else is using. If everybody's using stock or everybody's using mid-pack, you're going to get this type of race or that type of race. With all these horses bunched up with the change that they made in the race engine, how do you factor in what other people are doing in instructions? What kind of factor is that for you when you're planning out races?
That question.
Are you there? Did we lose Ed?
Hear me?
Oh, there we go.
Was that question to me, Chris?
Yeah, Ed, that was a question for you. Just how you factor races with the instructions and how tech support basically stated, if everybody picks the same instruction, a race is going to look a certain way.
I mean, it's just so engine. Get a horse that's still a maiden. On the previous engine. Couldn't get out of the gate or pretty slow out of the gate on the old engine. And I would use AA on them, and they did really, really well. I used above average on this horse with the new engine, and he went right to the lead and died. So, like the last engine, I kind of feel like if I had reversed instructions, if I had used AA on the old engine, races back, and A on this engine, I might have won both races, and both of them blew up on me.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that. I definitely feel that too. Like, I feel like, especially when you only get one chance for some of these races, it's really difficult to deal with the fact that you don't know going in how it's going to play, and especially with like these Derby preps, I mean, everything's on the line to give one race. And I remember the pressure 2 years ago. It's kind of funny to look back at, but I had my two big stable favorites were Evergreen and Howl of the Hound. And the first race I had with them on the new engine was the Risen Star, and I had Howl of the Hound on mid-pack, which I know now was probably a really dumb decision. That may have been the only big-time race I won on that race engine on mid-pack ever. And I probably only won because Howl of the Hound was that good. And so if I had lost that race and he had run awful, let's say I did the same thing the next race, he would have never even been in the Derby. So, and for a horse in a maiden race, it's similarly important. If you don't break your maiden now, you have no chance of moving up into these stakes races soon, and you could set their development back. So, just not knowing how that slight difference in instructions is going to play is a huge deal. I don't know how to grapple around that. It's just a reality right now.
The old engine, I tried to stay away. I wanted my horse to be independent.
Yeah.
Worked sometimes and didn't work others, but, there was so many fast, and they tried to just customize to each horse, which worked in one race but on this engine, I just don't know. Feel like it's fair, but it's still just can't go out too fast because you're not going to get that lead.
Yeah, and Chris, maybe you want to talk about this a little bit. We've had one major stakes race because of its implications, the Busanda last week. Did you get a chance to watch that race, and were there any takeaways from what you saw?
Yeah, I was in the race. Again, it's kind of a bunch field, very slow pace, kind of a merry-go-round type situation. I expected more out of my horse out of that race. But again, it's new. The race engine's new. Maybe I had the wrong instruction chosen for my particular horse that was in the race. I don't know. That's kind of like, I guess we're all at this point right now, is trying to figure out the new race engine that coincides with what our horses their abilities are, and how each instruction plays out with a speed horse or a closer in this type of race engine. So still trying to figure that out. And then obviously, as Ed mentioned earlier, these Triple Crown preps, road to the Derby right now with all these prep races. We'll find out probably sooner than later what's going on with this race engine, I would say. Yeah, what kind of take did you have from the Busanda?
For me, I thought it was one of the uglier races I've seen in this game in a long time. And after watching that race, that's when the panic button sort of hit. Like, is that really how these races are going to go with 12 horses? It was like, the winner came from like 8 or 9 wide, and she's a good filly. She ran a good allowance race before that with a nice time, so she's not totally awful, and I'm sure she's going to be a really nice filly on the Oaks Trail. But when you see a race happen like that, where the field is so structured, and I knew the instruction I was on, and I knew that it wasn't really followed the way I thought it would be followed. I was on an aggressive instruction, and my horse broke sort of mid-pack and then decided halfway through the race to take off to the lead. It was almost as if they didn't listen to the instruction until it was after halfway. And then you see the horses who are so wide the whole time, who you think would be compromised, they seem to be benefiting from being so wide and closing down the center of the track at the end of the race. And it was just a lot to take in. I don't think every stakes race is going to be like that. I mean, I've seen enough full fields to know that may have happened because none of us really know what we're doing yet. And maybe, you never know. Maybe of those 11 horses in the race, 7 of them were on stock, and the engine just said, I don't know what to do with this. Maybe. But
don't you think that the winner's next race is going to tell us a lot?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the winner's next race is going to tell us a lot, especially if the winner is drawn inside or in the middle, because it ran that way from post 12. Super impressive the way we normally thought of the game. But if we watch the Lecomte this weekend and the horse in post 12 does the same thing, circles the field, wins 8 wide, and then the Silver Bullet Day goes 8 wide and wins that way, then I think we're going to start to think, there might be something weird in the coding of this race engine, which is always the concern. We don't see the code. We have to trust that Horse Racing Park tested it themselves well, and they know that there's not some weird extreme rail bias that is killing every horse who's not way out in the center of the track. But if the horse, if that same horse comes back and draws the rail in their next stakes race and still closes and wins, I mean, maybe they were just that good. And we still have some time to figure that out. I thought that the one saving grace was that the horse that ended up on the rail, I think her name is Lint, she got second and she almost won. And she ran, in my eyes, probably the most impressive race considering what I've seen from this race engine, that she overcame that dead rail. She pushed the whole field aside to get room. She caught my horse, and then it looked like she was the winner until the other horse came down the center of the track. Now, obviously, winning 10 wide is probably more impressive in horse racing than just maintaining the rail, but I haven't seen other horses do that, so I'd love to see what happens if those 2 horses were switched, but we won't know that yet.
Yeah, looking at the 2 and your horse, the 7, you guys were tracking her up on the pace, but then, obviously the winner, like you mentioned, was 8, 9 wide the whole time and came flying down the stretch to win it. You have the 4th, 5th, 6th place finishers all closing as well. So could just be the distance with fillies right now, could be the race engine, could be a factor, all those things could factor in to what we saw there. And I guess all we can hope for is that all these races play out evenly throughout the Triple Crown Trail and the Oaks Trail, and the best horses that are winning are going to prove to do the same and not end up dead last in one of these races, and we're all scratching our heads like, how do you win the last race, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Bravo My Beast may be she may be the filly to watch. Maybe she loves the distance. There's so many unknowns. We don't know. That's the other thing. That race was a 9 furlong race for fillies in January. I mean, that is a unique set of circumstances. So there's still a lot of question marks, and we have like a 60-something% chance of rain for the races at Fairgrounds tomorrow. So maybe we get off track and we still don't learn too much more about this, but I think you can tell from all of us. I think we all would agree. There's a lot of question marks about this race engine, how things are going to go, and people are pretty uncomfortable, I think, and it naturally uncomfortable. Just that's change brings this level of discomfort. So
yeah, you're right.
My big hope is that we knew the last engine had some unfair situations that couldn't compete because of the braking issue. But we knew the engine, right? We knew it as it related to our top horses, let's say at least. Now we're drawn blind again and hope they can have an engine.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, time will tell, and we'll have to see how those things go. So good luck to everybody with this new race engine. If anybody gets the key to success, please share it with us, please.
Yeah, my stable is MB Stables. My private messages are open. I will accept any tactical advantages you can send me. Thank you very much.
And I want to apologize because I didn't give you the proper introduction. I introduced you that you're on the show, but there's a lot of new players out there, and they're just getting to know, other players here on the game. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what brought you to the game, give us a little background, and specifically, I want to know the past year or so, and I'm sure Dan can attest to this too. Maybe it's me. I don't know. I just seen your stable step up quite considerably, and I'd like to know the secret of that too, please.
Well, I'm retired. I'm in my 60s. Boulder City. We have a place in. Had a friend from the Midwest tell me about the game, and I know enough to tell me how to get started. Cautioned me against breeding. So I made a big commitment to mares. Best horse last year I bought from Evan race. Monster, which built like a router, and I tested her yesterday, and she's still not a router. So, but she looks like she's going to go 9-10 furlongs. But a lot of success has just been that I really decided that unless my horse something exceptional at a mile or more, I had, and I think that really helped me because all you big guns are going after those big route races, and probably had inferior horses that won races just because you guys weren't running in the sprints, but. Well, basically, if you have a top 50 6-furlong horse and have a top 80 or 90 router in workouts, I just try to stay over on that. Claimed one horse that just tried some wild instruction, and I think actually ended up in the BC and might have a chance in the off track, but it didn't work. So really, I think more than anything, I wanted to race at the higher tracks. I just stayed away from route races unless I thought I had. There was a doubt. All I can think of that I.
But Dan, it sounds like Ed's mic is going in and out. From what I could gather, he pretty much was trying to run sprint races unless he had an exceptional route horse. Is that what you picked up?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yeah, no, I think that your mic is cutting out a little bit, but I did gather that, and then also that you were advised to stay away from breeding, so you spent some time picking up mares and sort of building the stable out that way, and making some small purchases, which I think that is the classic, perfect way to start out a stable at Horse Racing Park. I think we all have dreams of breeding the best champions, but breeding is a long-term thing. It takes a lot of time for those breeds to pay off, and it's exciting to see nice workouts, but getting some runners in your stable right away, I think has proven fruitful for you and your stable, Ed, and obviously you had Oceanus this year do so well towards the end of the year and win the Breeders' Cup. How is that like for you?
Can you guys hear me okay?
We can. I think what's happening is that it's just cutting out every few seconds. So if you keep speaking, we're going to try to catch what we can and hopefully translate the in between.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that I really came to the conclusion of, I think sometimes we kind of wish horses to be really try to push them up the scale a little too fast. I'm sorry, and Ocean just showed she was head and shoulders above everything else after her maiden win, her best in my stable, and right up there with the best of all the fillies at 6-7 furlong. Force all those issues. She won by 2 at breaking her maiden Gulfstream. Then she won by 3 in an allowance race at basically lost one race because I screwed up the instrument. Who knows? She might have got beat then. A fighter's chance, but that race she lost, broke 7 back and closed to within 3. That gave me some hope to keep trying, but that's one of those situations where you step up to a G1 race and you just get crushed, and it was because of instructions, I think. That was just real exciting, and I ended up buying the stallion, Storming, because I bought her from 7, so. That was just way beyond my expectations. That competitive or
Well, I can say from racing against you a lot that, when that sort of level of horse, when I saw it come into your stable, I wasn't surprised to see you capitalize on it on the biggest stage. I think, I remember very clearly the TC America stakes, because I was scared of. There were so many talented horses in that race. Looking back at that race, that it wasn't a Breeders' Cup race, but in a way, it was almost stronger than a Breeders' Cup race in a weird way. I always have seen Mendocino Gal from T-Boy Racing. She's been a win machine on the New Mexico circuit, and she always looked like she could compete, and I was thinking, oh man, she's going to win this race, get into the Breeders' Cup. Or always a version from Tinky. I know she had some monster races before that, but little did I know that the real horse I had to worry about making the Breeders' Cup from that race was Oceanus. She did, and not only did she get in the Breeders' Cup, but he broke my heart when I had my horse Christina G. I thought I out-tacticked everybody. I cheated the system. Again, I got a horse who's not that good, about to win a Breeders' Cup, and then Oceanus came flying, and oh man, that was the story of my Breeders' Cup for the most part until the end this past year. But no, I think it was very well deserved, Ed, and a lot of stables can learn a lot by studying how you've grown your stable in such a short amount of time, but not in a rapid way, if that makes sense. You've done it swiftly, efficiently, and sort of the right way. Not taking crazy risks, but having some high rewards. So it's been really impressive, and yeah, a lot I still can learn from you, even if that sounds ridiculous.
Well, that's very nice, but I'll tell you, my August 28th race there, ballerina, I guess. I actually said something to you that day because I think all my horses got crushed that weekend. And I'm like, why are these horses breaking? They've all been breaking fine. And you said something to the effect that these large fields can't let your horse get that far behind. It's a different race. An 8-horse race, grade 3 8-horse race is so much different than a grade 1 12-horse. And I adjusted from what you said there. So.
Fantastic.
I apologize that it probably helped me win.
You know, the only thing I'm better at than winning races is telling other people how to beat me in races. It's quite a skill. But no, it was well deserved, and you had the best filly. I mean, I think that Pinky's filly was obviously great. Didn't get a chance to run the Breeders' Cup, but of all the competition all year, there were some standouts in the filly and mare sprint division. Just off the top of my head, Last Call, obviously, Slick Woman Laga was coming back, but Oceanus really stood out. And, I think she stamped it winning the La Brea at the end of the year, too. So it was well deserved. And it's really interesting that she comes from Storming. I don't want to get too deep into the pedigrees right now, but just the fact that he was a trials winner with that coming up in March, I think it goes to show that there is some value to having these really fast genes, even if he didn't end up being the best horse in the end. But he was quite a standout from an early age, and not too surprising that he's going to produce some fast fillies.
That's funny that you say that, because I always thought Storming was more of like a grass sire. His offspring really excel on turf from what I saw. And obviously, Oceanus is a super nice filly. And you could just see by her speed figures and just absolute monster. So she's going to be tough throughout this year and something to look forward to.
Absolutely. All right,
hey, Dan,
it's time to get into the Derby.
Yeah, you have your little special coverage. You want to throw it out there and tell us what you have?
Yeah. I've been teasing this a lot. This is something that I've done in past years, and that it was a perfect opportunity to use our show, to use our podcast, to share the list every week. I'll post it in the forums as well for people who don't listen to the whole show. But I wanted to share the results of our first panel list, and there was a lot of it's interesting point of the year. Nobody's really established themselves other than Shoe Fly with 50 points as being in the race. So there's a lot of disagreement about people amongst the panelists about who's the best horse. We had 30 different horses end up on the list. So, and I think it could have been even more if we got more panelists. And if you didn't vote this time, please feel free to vote the next time. I'll make a post in Horse Talk every single time it comes up, but whenever you can or can't participate, it's fine. It does not matter if you've never won a race at Horse Racing Park or you've won them all. I don't care. Anybody's opinion and looking at the fields and how they've run is important to me. I know all of us love horse racing, and the Derby Chase is something really exciting. So I'm excited to share our first list. Before I get into it, I want to mention the 5 horses who came really close, in case you were wondering why your horse is not on the list. So within 1 or 2 points making the top list, we had More Twist, the fast colt from Team 7. I know he's also eligible for the Lecomte. He may not be able to run, but if he gets in one of these fields, he's going to be really dangerous. We have Ben Nevis, a really big closer who I think is going to benefit off of this race engine. He's an up-and-comer that just needs to have the right opportunities, but he's right there. He got 3rd in the Sham. Last out. He's from my sire, people pleaser that I like a lot. So really excited to see how he does going forward. We we had At the Gates, who's a gelding from myself that Chris so graciously gave up on early in his career and let me get him in the auction. So he's looking pretty good, but just outside the list, we have Magical Sunset, who I believe was just purchased for $550. A big purchase by an old star stable, Riggins Racing. Shout out to Riggins if he hears this. He also got third in the Sham Dead Heated with Ben Nevis, and that's a big prospect as well. And then rounding out the just missed list, we have Crack the Party, who I believe is the fastest mile working horse in the game right now in the crop for Max. So obviously that's a big sign of talent. He just broke his maiden on turf, so there's still a lot to prove, but that's a great sign for him. So now that I get into the list, the way I'm going to do it, I'll go through one by one, and I welcome feedback from both you, Ed and Chris, on each of the horses. So coming in 12th was Hurricane Fly, and this is Chris's gelding. Chris, were you surprised to see him end up on this list?
Yeah, I was, to be honest. Obviously, he's run, I think, 7 times now. I'm gonna probably end up taking my time with him just a little bit, have him prove himself a little more. He does work fast. He has been a fast worker throughout. I always thought the talent was there, but as you can see, maybe the engine didn't play to his strength. Maybe this new engine will. I don't know. I think he's an off the pace type of horse. I tried him up on the pace one time around one turn at Churchill. He barely beat out one of Mo's horses that I ended up acquiring right after that race because I thought it was a super strong race. Didn't really play out that way as he went into the LA Futurity and got his doors blown off, finished right in the middle of the pack. So I expected more of him. He just worked 110-1 on the 14th. He's going to end up going into the Swale Stakes at Gulfstream Park on February 4th, 7 furlongs, and then I'll slowly stretch him out. And if he can prove himself to get a distance, which I think he's, his confirmation is for a router. I'm hoping that plays out, and hopefully I can get enough points to get him into the Derby.
I noticed he's another New Mexico bred from Jive. Those have had some success in the past, so you never know.
Yeah, definitely. Look forward to it.
All right. And then we have a tie for 10th between 2 horses. The first being Kentucky Pharaoh, who's running this weekend. He drew the rail in the Lecomte, which is going to be interesting to see. I'll just share my initial takes. I think Kentucky Pharaoh, from pretty much the summertime when we were running at Saratoga, he's been an obvious standout horse in Brian Arundel's stable. He's been working fast on dirt and turf. He had that huge with anticipation win on turf when the first sort of route races come to these 2-year-olds. And I think he's a horse who clearly he can handle a lot of ground. He's built to run forever. He's from classic bloodlines. The only question is he as good on dirt as he is on turf? The work suggests that he's up for the challenge. He has the rail, which it could be good, could be bad. It's too early to tell, but I do like his potential here. Ed, any thoughts on Kentucky Pharaoh? Have you run against him before?
Was that for me? I'm sorry, guys.
Yes, for you, Ed. Have you run against Kentucky Pharaoh before? Do you have any thoughts on him?
I have not run against him. He does have, I think, the second fastest mile out there.
Yes, I think so.
And him tomorrow.
And hopefully for him, I think he's probably going to want a fast track because he did not perform too well in the Remsen on the good track. I mean, maybe it was his post, but he probably, my guess is Brian wants a fast track.
And I think we're looking at 5% chance.
Yeah,
and I know
probably
and I know
around
one
there.
Guy that wants an off track.
Is that you or is that me? Because
that's you.
I know I want one.
Yeah, you want.
Okay. Yeah, I think
I have mine. 6 furlong work. My horse, I think, is 12th or. But your horse is way ahead.
I saw. So your horse dominant,
Yeah.
dominant in the comps. It looks very good. He has a pretty good off track work. I don't think he'll mind it at all. But I do think that my best chance with Night Raider, just a slight peek into that race, is to get an off track. So you're right. But I will say, Chris has a gun on the outside with Lunar Victory. It's going to be a really interesting race. It's too early to know what we don't know the track yet. There's so many race engine factors, but it's going to be a very interesting race.
Assuming a fast track, picked 1, 11, 12.
And I would say, assuming a fast track, you'd really like to see Kentucky Pharaoh do well. He's the only horse on the top 12 list who's in this field right now, so I think he'd be the favorite if a fast track shows up.
Yeah, with that horse too, Dan.
With that mile work, wow.
Yeah, very very conflicting, right? So he wins a turf race, a grade 3 by 4 lengths, wins it super easy, and then you have a 136 and 2 work. It's like turf or dirt,
Yeah, and he did not show up too well in the Bourbon or in the Breeders' Cup. Bourbon, he went out to the lead, which was just not the place to be, and he may have been pushed there from the outside post. And then the Breeders' Cup, he broke near last. I think he's a better horse than he's shown the last 3 races. So we'll see. It's sort of a tough spot to be the first horse that Brian's testing out on the Derby Trail in the new engine, but you got to bring your A game no matter what. So.
Yeah, and that dead
All right.
wheel, who knows? I mean, you just don't know.
No, absolutely. All right, so tied with him in 10th place is State of Fury. So this is a really interesting horse. State of Fury, he won the Grade 1 Pharaoh at Santa Anita to make the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And then, unfortunately, his closing style in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile got to him because he broke pretty much. He was in last and finished 10th. But coming into the Remington Park Springboard Mile, he made another huge closing effort to finish second. And that was on this old engine where it was much tougher to close. He's a fast horse. He's by Fire and Fury. He has nice bloodlines. And in my eyes, being such a massive closer like this, he's probably going to be, I guess his biggest weakness is taken away because of the engine not compromising him as much. And, we saw Alidar do well in the Triple Crown Trail last year, winning the Preakness, I believe. So there's a lot of talent there. I think his mile works is not as fast as some of these other horses, so it's going to be interesting to see is he maybe more of a straight mile horse or sprinter, or the classic distance is going to get to him. But I think he's very well deserved in this list. Any other thoughts, Chris or Ed?
Yeah, confirmation screams router. Works are a little lacking for me. He had a 110 and 3, and then he, as you mentioned, the slower mile work, 137 and 3. He backed that up with 2 other 6 furlongs work, 111 and 1 and 111 and 2. I'd like to see a little faster, but who's to say? He's a smallish type at 15.2 hands tall, so he might have some room to grow. And again, as you mentioned, I think the race engine will play more favorable to him versus against him as the old one did.
Yeah,
a quick note. I show him as one of the top 3 pedigree scores. I think he's got a big decision to make here. You're the master at getting those 5-year-olds to win the BC Classic that are colts. And win this Kentucky Derby. Gelding factor.
Yeah.
I think that horse has a big decision to make, and it comes down to breed this horse, which probably is pedigree, depth in the pedigree. So, got a big decision to make.
Yeah, and I will say I think that it's tremendously difficult when you are in a situation like this where you've paid top dollar for a stallion. I mean, he took a cover from Fire and Fury when he was at the height of his, I guess, for lack of a better word, his hype, being a leading freshman sire, producing a Breeders' Cup winner, his first crop, when his price got as high as possible, and he produced what may be one of the better colts Fire and Fury has out there. Obviously, there's a lot of breeding potential there, but not many colts win, or are competitive in these sort of races. Last year, I'll Take won the Preakness for Alydar. He was a very similar horse, but he was gelded. And as you said, Ed, the geld is a big factor. It's a big boost for horses in general. So it'll be interesting to see, if I got to say, I love the breeding side too much to geld him if I was Alydar, but I wouldn't blame him for 1 second if he did.
Yeah,
all right. Moving right along, this next horse, I really don't know how to pronounce his name, Chris, but Hi?
I didn't name him, buddy. So
I know. Where's Ryan when Ryan needs to, he needs to confirm how to pronounce this horse, but Hiei. This is the horse. I'm gonna say Hi for now.
Sure.
A really fast, talented colt who beat At the Gates in his last race in the Gray Stakes. Again, Chris, another fast horse. He's a little. I'd say the one knock I have on him, he's a little heavy, which I don't know if that means he's more of that mid-distance horse. He is femur shortest as well. Maybe he's going to peak at the right time. How do you feel about him? Is he one of your barn favorites?
Well, I think he's probably right now my best shot to get in the Derby and maybe do something in the Derby if I can get him there. He does have a router confo, which obviously we all look for when we're going down this trail. Funny story I have to tell you really quickly is you mentioned it. I bought it off Ryan from Patterson Stables for $40. I ended up gelding him about a month and a half later. He messaged me, "Why'd you do that?" Blah, blah, blah. And, I was like, well, it's not really a pedigree that I'm going to move forward with. So I want to give him the best chance that I could possibly give him. I debut him at a small track FP. I don't know if that's Fauner Park, Fairmont Park. I don't know. It's one of the low tracks, right? Maiden special weight. He wins by a neck. Ryan hits me up, tells me, "Hey, look, your horse, he did great." And I'm telling him, "Buddy, it's a low level race. Like, don't get excited. There's nothing to be excited about." So I run him back at Monmouth and allowance, and he finishes, fifth, second to last. And so I hit him back up and said, "See, what are you so excited about? Like, this horse is nothing." And eventually, he wins another allowance race, and then he wins the grade 3 up at Woodbine. So I have to give him props. He did breed a horse that's quick here. Whether he'll stay together long enough to get me to the Derby or if he's competitive enough to get me points to get in, that remains to be seen. But I do like his style, and he is working fairly quick. So I'm happy with where he's at right now.
Dan, I'm interested about the confirmation just a little bit. When I see a horse like this, and I kind of say, well, it's sound -1. Everything else, front leg soundness is good, which would be the worst. Hit or miss on the femur shortest, but when I see a horse that only has one blemish, so to speak, I'm more encouraged.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I people always ask, is femur shortest okay? Should I sell this horse? I always have said femur shortest is fine. It probably means you'll have a shorter career, but a lot of the biggest races happen before these horses fall apart anyway, so it's not a big deal. So it may actually end up being a positive. To win the Derby, you need to be a horse who's peaking early in their career. So it may be a positive in the end. All right, moving on to the number 8 horse. This horse actually, I did see, was posted for sale today. I don't know if there's a price. I'm sure it's a lot, but it's Pink Shark, another horse from Brian from Arundel. This will become a theme. He has a very strong group this year for the Derby. I think he has about 7 horses that I'd swap for just about any of mine. So Pink Shark is no different. I'm not sure if I believe he won the trial. So he's a horse who's been fast since the very beginning. He had some trouble breaking his maiden. Eventually broke his maiden in a $500 turf stakes race. But he's just hitting his stride now. Ran second in the Kentucky Jockey Club, and then he won the Sham a couple weeks ago, but in a very impressive wide trip. He's a big horse. He's, not the prettiest horse ever, but he's kind of that classic 2-year-old to 3-year-old transition. That's when he's at his best. Maybe a horse for now, but not a horse for the future. What do you guys think? Chris or Ed, do you have any thoughts on Pink Shark?
I have a question. Is he on the chopping block because of the average heavy? I mean, because he just won a prep race. I would say Sham Stakes is a good prep race to start moving forward. I mean, he's by Shark Force.
I honestly feel like if Brian didn't have 7 or 8, top 20 Derby horses right now, he probably wouldn't be selling him. But when you have that many talented horses and you have one who's built a little worse, I've been in that position before. Those are the ones you probably want to sell first. But he may be the best of the lot when it actually comes to this first Saturday in May. You never know. But that somebody who wants to buy it should have that in mind, of course. But he's a talented horse. He's been a talented horse from the very, very beginning.
My only thought on the horse really is that the Jockey Club race, to me, more impressive because it's a mile and a 16th. And I started looking at all the Sham winners. I think 0 of the Sham winners in the history of Horse Racing Park have finished in the money in the Derby. So at this point, I think mile races, they're fun. They got points, but I don't know that. I mean, you have to be able to go further. And this horse is the exception to the Sham winners in that it's already won a G2 Grade 2 race at a mile and a 16th back in November. So if it holds together, but 9 races, probably looking at another 2 before the Derby, I'm guessing, and then the Trail. I think the horse is still going to be pretty competitive on Saturday in May.
Yeah, he didn't win that race in November. He finished second by a nose, but like as you mentioned, that's a points race. So again, it's a big race. Everybody's putting in their best to get a head start on the Trail. So he's a tallish horse. I don't know. Maybe Brian's thinking, his best is right now and is not going to be down the road. I don't know, but he's a good looking horse.
Absolutely.
We don't really have any mile works this year, so it's hard to.
It is hard to benchmark them without those works because there's definitely a clear separation between those mid 136 workers and then the 137 workers. I think I've noticed it more in this engine too. So as we go on, I think we're going to see some separation in these for sure. Next up, we have a horse who I think has been getting a lot of love. He was on a lot of people's lists, but sort of in the middle of their list. So I think a lot of people like him, but just don't think he's quite top-notch yet. And we're going to see how he does. In 7th, we have Deep State, gelding from SCCJ Stables from Jim. He, after being gelded in September, he's done no wrong. He broke his maiden at Gulfstream. He stepped up to a big-time Keeneland 7-furlong allowance race. He won that race and then went to the Springboard Mile, and he won that closing down the center of the track in the old engine. A really talented gelding from Class Edge. I think that, which you'd expect with Class Edge, you're going to get a lot of distance. Class Edge is a very talented sophomore sire. He was one who could close and run all day. With Deep State, I actually kind of have some distance concerns. I feel like, for me, he's one of those horses who looks like that classic 1-turn mile, 7-furlong monster. But I do have a little concerns what's going to happen when he has to go 2 turns, mile and an eighth. What's going to happen? What do you guys think? He's obviously talented, but is he the next Derby winner?
I think you're right on it. I think he's a miler, but I mean, you can't blame Jim for trying. 5.5 up to 7 furlongs to a mile. Keep going. He's winning. So I don't fault him for being on the trail. And again, it was an impressive win last out, closing from where he did. Time will tell if he improves. Again, with these horses, the works are lacking a little bit when you're talking about distance work, 6 furlongs, the mile, he has 137 and 2. And then you look at a 5 furlong work, he's 58 flat. So that's why, me personally, I'm leaning more towards he's a miler than a classic type horse. But again, you got to try until they prove you wrong.
My only thought is Jim continues, gets a big horse. It seems like they outperformed their works. His last mile work, 137 and 2, but he went out in almost 26, 25 and 4. It kind of leads me to believe the horse is a little lazy, unless he's given instructions, and I'm guessing figured out. Does show up on my pedigree chart as number 2. So on the mare side, it looks like they're pretty. I just don't underestimate Jim. He seems to outperform his works with.
Oh, absolutely. I learned that the hard way with Perfect Class last year. I think she eventually became very impressive on the work tab as well. But at the beginning, it seemed like, oh, what is this coming? Who is she? I had I Love Me coming off of the Breeders' Cup Juvie turf win, and I was going in the wrong direction. He was going in the right direction, and it might be the same thing for Deep State. And that's a great insight, Ed, on the workout as well. That it was a bit of a slower start. I do think the horse has some things to prove, but they all have things to prove at this stage, and he's as good as any. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how he does in the new race engine. All right,
being a closer like that, not going to hurt him.
No, definitely not as much as the old engine. All right, moving along, we have another horse from Brian. The top 12 Brian horses list this year so far. We have Sirius Black, a very talented. Stop saying talented. Very interesting start to his career, but has been showing his talent recently. I think he was one of the horses who, in the turn of the 2-year-olds first getting to work, that Brian was very high on. He posted really fast 3 furlong works before he was able to go 5 furlongs. Showed a lot of speed at that point, but he was a bit of a slow breaker. And so I think on this old engine in the shorter races, he just wasn't able to get out of the gate as fast. And now that he's moved on to route races and he can just go out front or at least push a little bit harder and get out into a good position, he's been very impressive. Just missing in a strong Keeneland allowance race and then winning the gun runner wire to wire last time out at a mile and a 16th. And he has some stellar works to back it up. He's worked in the mid to low 136s 3 times in a row now, and just improved actually 3 days ago to 136 and 2, which is just a stellar workout. So sky's the limit for this horse. I'm very high on this horse. I think this is a horse that, with the slow braking, but the talent, this might be a perfect horse for this new race engine. Do you guys disagree or agree?
I'm kind of on the fence. He has a lot of great horses, Brian does. I just find it hard that this horse had so much difficulty winning races after he broke his maiden. Even the Keeneland race, a mile and 16th allowance race, finishing second. I don't know how strong that race was. Last out was a nice win, but again, going 24 for the first quarter and having a 3-length lead, you probably should win that race, especially with a talented horses, like you mentioned. I do love his works. So, again, he does have the talent there. Yeah, he is capable. I just want to see more from him before I make a decision one way or another on him.
I love the breeding here. And look at those that bottom half winners back there. And a lot of horses there that made over $500.
Yeah, it traces back to Lucy Van Pelt, who was a that's his 3rd dam, I believe. It was a big time horse, one of Charlie Farley's first good horses. When Charlie Farley was just the horse who lost to 5.5s. So a big time history in that pedigree for sure.
And I guess I would just say, we have at the top 20 works. I think there's top 20 mile works at no points. So this thing could just so early, and yet it's going to happen really fast, right? So
yeah, I noticed
really good horses out there.
I will say I noticed from a lot of the panelists who sent in their list, they were a bit trepidation. They were a little afraid to make big declarations. They feel like there's still a lot to figure out. So there's a lot of horses that are similarly thought of, and if you saw the whole list of 30, you'd see a lot of names on there who haven't even won a race or haven't won more than one race. I think there's still a lot to go. We're still just in the 10-point race season, so a lot of points to be earned. Moving right along to our number 5 spot, I think this was when we started to get some clear horses that stood out on the list. We have Naples with 2 P's, and many of you probably remember Naples, the Kentucky Oaks, the big-time mare Breeders' Cup winner a couple of years ago. This is her half-brother, and he is extremely good. You normally do not see horses that are half siblings or full siblings to champions who are just as good as this horse. He definitely deserves this number 5 spot on this list. He won that the Kentucky Jockey Club race back in November in his only graded stakes try. He won it the far outside post. He's from Apples. He's by Apples to Oranges, who was I think he finished 3rd in the Derby for me. So definitely a classic pedigree, being related to Naples out of Apples to Oranges. Only knock I'd have on him is his build with the poor leg. Kind of concerning, but talent-wise, you got to love this horse from Mo. What do you guys think?
Yeah, great pedigree, as you mentioned. Naples. It kind of hurts because I gave up his sister to Brian, who made all the money with her. But yeah, great family. Decent works. Nothing too blazing. We haven't seen a mile work recently, at least. Last one was October 24th, going way back, 137.1. So I'm sure he's working faster than that. Again, my concern is just as yours, Dan, is the poor front leg soundness and when that's going to catch up to him and when that's going to hit. What about you, Ed? How do you feel about this horse?
Well, I think we all agree it's those legs will probably give out sometime this year, but could very well make it to May, of course. So a lot of talent, and we have a lot of these horses that haven't even come close to a race since November 26th. So how are they going to respond? There's not a lot of time, so their next race has to be pretty good. Maybe they get one in February and then.
Yeah, I have to imagine
100 horses that could make this field.
Oh no, absolutely. I think that there's going to be 100 horses who try. That's for sure.
Absolutely, no question.
So my guess is, I think Mo's playing it smart. He sees the poor leg. He doesn't want to put too many races on his history before the Derby. I wonder if he's waiting for the Southwest. I know there's probably going to be about 6 of the top 20 or maybe top 12 Derby horses trying for that huge purse in the Southwest. But, obviously he's waiting to pick his spot, so it'll be interesting to see where he goes next.
Well, he's a very
and now
he's got a plan for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I'll always respect Mo in any field. And now we move into really the cream of the crop. And I thought this horse who finished 4th on the list probably should have finished 3rd. I feel like some of the panelists discounted him because of his history on turf, but Quiet Return, just an absolute monster 2-year-old last year, easily winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf in just a runaway effort. The son of Graveyard, who he actually, interesting story. I put out when I retired Graveyard, it was a little late in the year. I wanted to get as many mares as possible, so I said I'm going to put him up for $1. He was a very good classic horse. He hopefully will be a useful sire. He's an outcross. I'll give a rebate to anybody who uses him. It's only $1, and I'll give you a voucher. It's free money. And All in the Gate said, "You bet. I'm also going to produce the best 2-year-old turf horse in the game with it." So, big time horse, and then tried dirt for the first time, and he ran head to head with one of the top horses we're going to talk about soon, just getting nosed out by Garoglaga in the LA Futurity. Quiet Return, really an amazing horse. Maybe one knock I have on him is he's built like a sprinter, which luckily, even though he's built like a sprinter, he works and runs like he can run all day. I love this horse. I think he arguably could be the best horse in the crop right now. Versatility, his tactical ability, he's a standout to me. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I have him rated 1 on my list. Again, the conformation is a concern, but then again, maybe 2-3 years ago, I had a horse named Rainstorm with a familiar conformation, very similar. It was a high mid, looked like a sprinter. He ran second in the Derby, so he's obviously outrunning it already. So who's to say he can't go any further? And he's super uber talented, and I think Gaffleon, he rides him well, and as far as the race engine goes, he's could play well for him.
I have him tied for second on my list. I have 3 tied for second, so I don't. Go pretty far as a 2-year-old. Now it's just racing luck and figuring out the race engine more than anything.
And with this horse, even if the Derby Trail doesn't work out, I think he's literally the best turf horse in the crop right now. Big future ahead. Maybe a little bit like Mickey. I mean, we talked a lot about Mickey last year, and we always said, he looks like a decent Derby horse, but he seems pretty good on turf. And then eventually, when he got back on turf, he just started rolling and won the Breeders' Cup Turf. So this could be a very similar story for Quiet Return. Much still to figure out. Finishing third on our list is the only horse of mine on this list, Sweet Shine, a pretty big yearling son of Sweet Sweat. After his first maiden race, which is kind of a throwaway for most horses, at least in the game and definitely in my stable, he's gone 3 for 3, winning on turf, and then he stepped up to a state-bred stakes race, dirt for me, which he won, and then he won the Smarty Jones last race pretty convincingly against maybe a bit of a soft field, but he won very strongly. He's a fast horse. I don't think he's built for the long term. He might be built for show up on first Saturday in May, but I think he's unquestionably the most proven horse I have in my barn. I really liked the way he ran last time, and he just keeps getting better. My big question mark is I just don't know how he's going to adapt to the new race engine. He should be pretty well suited for it because he's not naturally too quick, but a lot to still learn. I loved running his dam. I loved running his sire. I think that it's really exciting for me to have a nice, son of theirs to work with on the Derby Trail. And who knows? I think sky's the limit for the rest of this trail for him. And right now he's pointed towards the Southwest. I know it's going to be a tough race, but I'm hopeful, and I think maybe the panelists are being a little nice to me to put him up at third. What do you guys think?
Yeah, he's a nice horse. 57-4 for a 3-year-old this early in the season. I don't remember seeing a whole lot of those. So, he has the speed. My only concern, he's kind of built like a sprinter in my book. He's tall, heavy. Obviously, he won easy at a mile, and it was funny because Dan, I don't know if you remember when you won the race, I actually said, "Hey, that was a nice win." You're like, "Yeah, it's okay," but I think it was a really nice race and a good time as well. We just have to see how it plays out with more distance for me. Ed, what's your take?
I have him rated the highest pedigree in the field, course, 3x3 to commanding helps. Got a bad break there that he didn't get the coveted triangle with of his build, but
yeah, I think that Chris, your criticism of his distance capabilities is very fair. Probably the reason I reacted that way is because my stable had been doing rough, and I didn't think he beat a whole lot in that race. But I guess looking back on it, I did realize, it was a pretty good win. It was a pretty fast time, and he just did it so commandingly. Not to overuse his double grandfather's name, but I'm a little scared to work him a mile. I definitely won't work him a mile before the Southwest, but yeah, there are some potential limitations. He did work 137 flat back in as a 2-year-old, so he doesn't seem to be totally devoid of it, but he definitely is built and sort of runs like that mid-distance horse more than that classic horse, but time will tell. All right, moving on to the big guns, and it was a close race for the top 2 spots. Either horse could have won it, but we ended up having Rogue Laga finish second. Rogue Laga might be, and I might be pronouncing this incorrectly, I don't know. Correct me if you know if I'm wrong, but he may be the most brilliant horse in this crop. He is fast, he can carry his speed. His only bad race, his first race. Every other race has been exceptional. I mean, finishing second in the Breeders' Cup to the number 1 horse we'll talk about shortly was, is no slouch. I just think, this horse, if any horse is going to remind me of individuation in this crop, the eventual classic winner, it looks like it's Rogue Laga. He was a very savvy purchase for $150 back then for Brian, because his value has skyrocketed since. It's hard to knock this one. He would probably be my number 1 if I'm if I was hoping to buy anybody in this field. Obviously Brian would never sell this horse to me in a million years right now, but he's something special, and he won the Del Mar Futurity really impressively, won the LA Futurity, second in the Breeders' Cup. There's really not much wrong you can say about him. What do you guys think?
Yeah, he had a rough post in the Breeders' Cup. I think maybe hindered him from winning that as well. And then we're looking at a 5-win race streak. I think it's Brian's best shot, this horse here, and I have him tied for second with Shoefly on my list. But for me, the top 3 are Quiet, Return, this horse, and Shoefly, and I think they're hands above everybody else right now as we sit. So I think Brian's going to have a lot of fun on this Derby trail with this horse, and I want to try to stay away from him.
This was my number 1, and like you said, 1, 2, darn close. No, from the scout loves the mud, so that was kind of my little nudge. Very easily, probably have a 5 race win streak.
And without further ado, we bring us to the top of our list, the first Derby list of the year, and it's fitting that the top points getter, 2-year-old champion, the horse to beat, Shoefly, ended up number 1. It's pretty self-explanatory when you look at this horse's form. He's just a monster. I mean, he ran a massive race in the Breeders' Futurity. It was still a little underlooked. He was the post-time favorite in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but it wasn't a huge favoritism, and he dominated that race. I mean, it looked like the rest of the horses were standing still at a certain point. His closing effort in that race, which didn't have a crazy pace either, was just super impressive. He backed it up with a win in the Remsen, good surface, which my take is that I don't think he loved the off-track. He's just that good that he still won despite it. And so he showed that he can still get that distance. He is the prototype of that monster 2-year-old horse that's still really good as you go into the Derby trail. I think the only question with him is he is already massive. He is He's 15 3 hands, but he's already 1,242 pounds. That is really big for that height. I mean, he's very close to what you would expect to be the maximum weight he's going to get to. I don't know how many great races he has left. He kind of reminded me a bit of like the Pretty Pharaoh Beach Dandy type who, they won the Derby, so that's not a bad company to be in, but there's a lot of horses like that who do well in the juvenile, but they just don't quite have it yet in the Derby, and I think that's his only question mark. He's obviously really talented. His works could be a bit better, but the races are so good, I think it makes up for it. And he's a very deserving top horse in the list, and he's still a colt. I mean, even if things don't work out, I think he's going to be a really intriguing horse to breed to one day. So Lazy Eye has a really good one in her first, I guess her second full year back into the game. What do you guys think? Are you guys fans of Shoe Fly?
I'll jump in here. They've done nothing wrong, so what, it's got to be in the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, it ran one on a good track. I guess my only concern is I think look back history of a couple have gone forward, but not very. But what else could the horse have done? Hard to jump off of it.
Yeah, what can you say about the horse? It's not the best pedigree in the field. It's not the best conformation in the field, but he's a winner. So, and you look at his races over a mile, he's undefeated. Large fields, 14, 14, and 11. So he's not going to have any issue with large fields, and he's been winning. And he's up at the top for a reason, so he's the king until he gets knocked off his perch.
I got one question for you guys. Dad is 11 years old, I think, TS Day, but this horse might have better I just always wonder when you take a stallion or a mare that has that a good lumbo and they move up the scale, that isn't a really good sign.
Yeah, I think those sort of conformational, generational conformational things are really interesting because you never know. Like, TS Day, obviously he's 11, so he wasn't racing in recent engine, but he was a Grade 1 winning sprinter back in the just a few years ago. If hypothetically, even with his good lumbo, hypothetically, are there just some traits that he was missing from being a superstar router that his dam happened to have, and the combination just worked out perfect. And I think when you see them improve off of that, it's a really good sign. I used to not want to breed to stallions with good lumbos. It's actually why I made a big mistake of selling No Doubt About It and Aggravation, two very nice sons of Commanding, because I sort of figured they're good lumbo. There's no way they're going to be the best producers in their crop. I was really lucky to get a chance to buy No Doubt About It back before he produced some of his best offspring, and he's been a very nice sire for me. But you love to see that they're still producing those very good and ideal lumbos, which are just so common today, and you don't want to be missing any speed traits. The game is so competitive now. I think you really have to have the whole package to compete. So that's a really good sign.
Let me ask you this. Do you switch up jockeys now or no?
I don't think you can. I mean, you don't fix what's not broken, right? I mean, let's say, next race Boca Chica doesn't perform as well, then maybe you switch it up. But Boca Chica's a decent rider. I mean, he was a 10% rider in the old game, even though it was only at Charlestown. His stats can't be that bad, and he's worked well with the horse. Sometimes there's just that fit that it just works really well. I wouldn't switch it up. I'm too superstitious for that. What about you, Ed?
Oh, I would have never thought of 3 in a row is pretty good. So, and you know what, mid to late, especially the mid trait for the jockey, I think probably works a little bit better in this race engine than it even did in the last one. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So that rounds out our top 12 Derby list, or Derby dozen, as they'd say. Most likely, I'm going to ask for the next round on Sunday after we have a day to process the Lecomte. So I'll be probably reaching out to everybody who's provided me lists, but still make the post. And if you haven't joined yet, feel free to join. I am not going to restrict anybody from joining or leaving at any given time. As many lists as I can get is what makes this list really fun. Thank you to everybody who reached out and put their list together, and I think it's going to change a lot over the next few months.
Yeah, I appreciate Dan you compiling those lists together, and we'll do this every week, or at least when there's races that could change the list. That way everybody can follow along. It's a fun, exciting time of the year. So appreciate you putting in that work. Due to time constraints, we're not going to be able to preview any stakes races this weekend. We do have the Lecomte that we mentioned that has Kentucky Derby implications with points, and we also have the Silver Bullet Day Stakes for fillies that has Kentucky Oaks points. Really quickly, I don't know if either of you guys even looked at either race, but if you did, can you give me a winner of each race? Who you think is one to look out for?
Sure, I'll go first. For me, the Silver Bullet Day, I really, really like Shining at Night. Filly from Our Athletes, she's working amazing. I sent some pretty nice offers to Our Athletes and was promptly rejected, so I know he thinks really highly of her as well. I think she might be one of the best fillies in the crop when it's all said and done. I think she's going to really show herself this race. And then for the Lecomte, my instinct is to pick Kentucky Pharaoh, but I think with this new engine, I'm going to take a bit of a gamble, and I'm going to go for your horse, Chris, Lunar Victory. I think he's in a good spot. The outside's not as bad anymore. He ran really well in the Coronation. As long as we get a fast track, which I have a feeling we will, it's not a huge chance of rain, I think he'll be in a great spot to do well.
Ed, do you have any selections for either of those races?
Let's see. If it's fast, I'm gonna go with Kentucky Pharaoh. I think this engine goes a lot when not down here real fast. I know Dan has at Night Raider. On and off. That would be my. Dan's going to win the race if it's. And I agree with him.
I want to see this sloppy as possible.
Yeah, sloppy to muddy is Dan's choice.
And the Silver Bullet Day, you're on the same horse Dan's on?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want to wish everybody good luck in those races. Hope you get the run that you want and the outcome that you hope for. Any lasting thoughts before we sign off, guys?
I just really appreciate you guys including me. It was real nice, Chris, for you to ask me a couple of times. And then you guys were so patient today with trying to get the microphone to work. It was an honor to be on here with you guys. You guys are...
I appreciate having you on, Ed. Dan?
I mean, I guess my only thoughts before we wrap up is, everybody, try to take in as much information about the race engine as we go. I think we're all in the dark. Don't feel like, anybody has it figured out yet. If anybody says they have it figured out, they're lying. And, now that we're jumping back into the podcast, we really, anybody who wants to be on the show, please reach out to Chris or I. And any ideas for the show or things you want us to discuss, especially if you're a newer player and you want us to discuss any topics, those are always really helpful for us to organize the show around. So we appreciate any sort of feedback like that as well.
Yeah, to second that, we love player involvement on here. So if you can join the show, roundtable discussions, that's what we're looking for. New players or old players, everybody's welcome. So I second that, and I appreciate everybody tuning in and listening. Until next week, let's race.